Welcome to the 5th episode of the Fosgail Mindset. I'm your host, Myka Kennedy Stephens. This is a special extended podcast episode with author and activist Cynthia Changyit Levin. I caught up with her on May 20th, 2025 to talk about the importance of advocacy work, how to engage in advocacy, and how to be an activist while also attending to well-being in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. I came away from our conversation inspired and hopeful, and I hope you do as well. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Fosgail Mindset. Today, I am joined by an old friend, old in the fact that we've known each other a long time, a long-time friend, Cynthia Changyit Levin. Levin is the author of From Changing Diapers to Changing the World, Why Moms Make Great Advocates and How to Get Started. And she's also got an upcoming handbook titled Advocacy Made Easy that will be launching this summer in 2025. A non-partisan activist working across a variety of issues, Levin coaches volunteers of all ages to build productive relationships with members of Congress. She advocated side by side with her two children from their toddler to teen years and crafted a new approach to advocacy based on her strengths as a mother. She's currently a volunteer with Results, the One Campaign, Bread for the World, CARE, Moms Demand for Gun Sense in America, Moms Rising, and the UN Foundation's Shot at Life campaign. Thank you so much for joining me today, Cynthia.
It's my pleasure. And I listened to you, reading off all of those things, but you and I knew each other before any of that happened. And I was just learning to become an activist. And you were around for some of the very first actions I ever organized. So this is really fun to be with you today.
Yes. I remember bringing my children to your house for a letter writing campaign. I think you were volunteering for Results at the time.
Yeah.
And we came over to your house. We'd only been in the neighborhood for about 2 months, I think.
That's
and,
right.
Yeah. It was just, hey, come over. We're going to have snacks and we're going to write letters and draw pictures and advocate for fair housing and
something like that. I'm sure it was
yeah.
probably if it was Results, but you didn't see that coming to have a quick invite to a political action with your kids. But you were down for it. You were game, and it was great.
Yes, that was quite a long time ago when our kids were in preschool.
Are we going to date ourselves? We probably should, just for context. Yeah. We each have a college freshman, well, college sophomore now, because they just finished up. 19-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. They've grown up, haven't they? So how did you become involved in advocacy and lobbying work, and what's kept you engaged in it for so long?
It would have been right around that time that we met when I was first getting involved. The first time that anybody asked me to write a letter, much like I asked you to write a letter to Congress, was at my church, and it would have been before I had kids. My church was involved with a group called Bread for the World. And Bread for the World churches will once a year do what they call an offering of letters. Usually you think of an offering at a church or a synagogue or something. It was like offering money. But Bread for the World asks people to write letters to Congress about hunger specifically. You get some education on it and they tell you how to write a letter. My church, the volunteers were very sneaky, and they would actually bake bread in the church during the church service. So
oh, wow.
You'd be there, and then you would smell this wonderful smell going, and then they would come up and say, you can have some bread when you write your letters. And you're like, okay, what do I have to write to get that bread? But that was the first time I ever took an action. And then fast forward a little bit to when I had my first child. 2003 is when my child was born. And I discovered something, just fun fact about my body, is that my milk doesn't come in for a while. And now having kids, that is just what happens to me. It doesn't necessarily happen to everybody, but I was so focused on being what I thought was a good mom that I wanted to breastfeed only, and unintentionally was depriving my child of nutrients. And 4 days into Yara's life, things were not going well. And I called my doctor and just really upset. She was like, calm down. You just need to get some formula into that baby and everything's going to be fine. But effectively, the baby was starving and I didn't know it because I was so focused on trying to do the right thing. So, Christmas Eve, my husband runs out to CVS. We get some formula, a little water, boom, baby's fine. But then I started thinking about all the moms around the world that don't even have clean water, much less a quick pharmacy to get to or a doctor to call. That was sort of the inkling how I started thinking about that. It would be a few years later before somebody encouraged me to go to Washington, D.C. to take more actions besides making phone calls and writing letters, which, by the way, are wonderful things to do when you have a newborn because they wake you up at all hours of the night and then you're wide awake. And sometimes calling an answering machine of a member of Congress or just writing a letter would like help me settle down from those weird 2 a.m. thoughts of like, oh, there's all these children everywhere in the world that are dying. It's like, well, I could do something about it. So that was kind of the beginnings of everything. About the time you came around, I was starting to take things to the next level of inviting my friends to do it and getting to the other part of your question of like what keeps me involved. It's the involvement with these organizations and being with like-minded people that share a vision of what the world can be like and are taking real actions to do it. I think there's nothing else more inspiring for me than my fellow volunteers. And when my friends joined in, that was really empowering too, to see that my efforts were being multiplied through your actions. Things like that happening over and over the years, that keeps me involved.
That's beautiful. I see in that a really special connection for the people that you're advocating for. They're actual people for you, is what it sounds like to me. I mean, you identify with them, you relate to them. They're
When I,
not just statistics.
yeah, when I started, I was, doing this for moms in those nebulous other countries that didn't have as much. And I didn't think that I'd ever meet them, probably. So it was just sort of an extension of my imagination from statistics. But a funny thing happened along the way is that I did start meeting them. At one point, I got an invitation from the United Nations Foundation. They knew of my work with results, and they had a program where they brought several moms of young kids to Uganda to meet moms of young kids who were receiving services through UNICEF, and through translators we would speak to them and talk about that. So that was a really special time for me, around 2012 or something like that, where that kind of came to fruition and became real. Another thing that happened was that I branched out. I realized that I couldn't ignore the poverty in my own country in the United States. So I started doing work also through Results and Bread for the World on programs like SNAP, the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, WIC, the Women, Infants, and Children Program, renters. I think you mentioned that we might have been doing something on housing back then. And then it becomes very, very real because these are the friends and neighbors in your area. Like when we sent our kids to public school, there were kids on SNAP. And so they're people that are in our community. And now I have many friends that are advocates that I'm fighting for them. And I've made friends who are advocates in the community working on disability advocacy. There's a woman who's talked about in my book. Her name is Elena Hung, and I tell her story. I have profiles of different moms. And guess what? Here we are in 2025, and we're fighting for Medicaid again. And when I take actions on Medicaid, I am thinking directly about Elena and her daughter Ziamara. It is not a faceless thing. Their faces are beautiful, and I'm fighting for them.
As you mentioned, the political landscape is much different now than it was when you started in this work over 15 years ago.
It's like those memes they say, it's like, she didn't know it, but this is going to be really important later.
Right? You've described yourself in your writing as a peaceful person and a bridge builder. And those are two cornerstones of your signature approach to advocacy. How have those cornerstones been tested as we've seen the US political environment become more polarized?
Yeah, I'm going to start this by saying that we need all kinds of activists, and sometimes bridges need to be burned. But
Mm.
for me, it is my nature to be a bridge builder and a peaceful person. It's sometimes not the most popular kind of activism that you see out there. Through my work, I've seen just incredible things happen when activists go in and talk to people who might think incredibly different things than they do, but narrowing down on one issue and speaking human to human and minds being changed. I think that this is what's needed more than ever on a level not only just constituent to member of Congress, but on our level, on the person to person level. I also find the closer the person is to you who disagrees with you, the harder it is. And there's
Mm.
probably people listening on this podcast who are at political odds with their families. And I find that that is probably the hardest of all. When I talk to my members of Congress, I'm not their best friend.
Mm.
We have a professional relationship and stuff like that, but we're not like going out for a beer afterwards or anything like that. It's like we have jobs to do. They have in their mind what they need to do, and I have in mind what I need to do. And we sit down and we are professional for the duration of that conversation. Probably my most controversial blog I ever wrote was, I think it had a title something like, Can You Set Aside Your Differences for 5 Minutes? And it was
Mm.
about this kind of thing because that particular blog was about some work that I was doing with Senator Josh Hawley's office. Many people know of Josh Hawley, if they do, around the country, for his signature um, famous picture from January 6th with his arm upraised, cheering on the rioters. I'm never going to agree with him on that. And he's probably not going to agree with what I think on that issue. But what I am there for when I go into his office is to talk about people in poverty. And sometimes I'm talking about global poverty for people who have never even heard of his name and have no idea who he is. But I feel like my reasons for doing this are bigger than my disagreements with him. And they have to be. Your why has to be bigger than your aversion to talking to somebody who's in opposition to you. So some surprising things happened along the way. I would meet with him. I had some photo ops with him where we would talk about different things. And I took some very friendly looking pictures with him. And, the big picture that came from that blog was I was playing rock, paper, scissors with him because I had had many stiff formal pictures that I played. This isn't really going anywhere. I'm gonna ask him to do something silly. And I was like, would you play rock, paper, scissors with me? He's like, yeah, okay. And we both came up with scissors. And we were both really surprised in that moment. And so the look of surprise and delight on our faces is there. And he was like, do you want to do it again? I'm like, no, we agreed on something. So let's just let the picture stand like that. But I became memorable in the office for that, and that's helped relations. And fast forward a couple of years after that, and here we are in the Medicaid fights where we have thousands and thousands of people who are at risk for losing their access to medical care. And all the Democrats are united that they want to protect it. Almost all the Republicans are against it. There's only two senators who have voted to protect him, and one of them is Josh Hawley.
Hmm.
So it's just like, I know I won't win all of the issues with him, but that's an important one. And we're actually working together on that one. I mean, we're not sitting down having late night coffee and working on it. But it's like I'm writing media about Medicaid. He just wrote an op-ed in the New York Times, which is just like blowing people's minds. So if I can find any area of agreement, I feel like I owe it to the people who need the help that I should go in and do that. And I hear from plenty of people who tell me it's like, well, thank God you're doing that work because I just can't. And I'm like, great, then you should be protesting because I'm not good at that.
Mm.
I do it, I don't like it, but I am not the best at like rallying the call and standing outside and doing things like that. So we each have to find our own ways to do things. And if my gift is sitting down with people at a table and keeping my composure and helping them bring out their own humanity, then that's what I need to be doing.
That is a really, really inspiring story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And what I was hearing in that story actually relates to a theme that I was hoping might come out of our conversation. And that is the theme of potential, of advocacy as a way to realize some potential, or as a way of kind of tapping into potential outcomes that maybe we don't tap into because we're too afraid, or because we don't know how to get to the table to sit down with someone and have that kind of conversation, or we're not sure how it happens to set aside the differences for a moment and just be two humans that share a bond in community.
Yeah. And some of it's just logistical, right? Because I've been doing this kind of work at the beginning of the second Trump administration. I mean, I was doing it beforehand, but, I think that we can look at that as a milestone of like marking kind of a new era of America. I've been doing this work since the beginning of the year where people started getting alarmed and upset. And if the first Trump administration taught activists anything, or the beginning activists anything, they learned how to make a phone call. In 2016, I would get a lot of calls like, it's like, how do I make a phone call to Congress and what do I say? Well, a lot of people know how to do this now. So the phone lines were like jammed up. And then the question became, how do you even get your message through? And if you had talked to me 2 decades ago, I wouldn't have thought that I would have had the potential to be in this position. But because I'd been doing it so long, I had relationships in the office and I had the direct emails for the specific aides I wanted to talk to. What I was doing, instead of being frustrated on the phone, is I was setting up Zoom meetings. I'm like, we need to talk and we need to look at each other while we're talking. And they allowed me to set up those meetings and bring other people into them. So sometimes it's like, how can I even do this because I'm afraid? Sometimes it's like, I don't feel like I have the education to do it. But then the third thing is like, it seems really daunting to even think about having that kind of relationship. How do you even do those? All that being said, that's actually why I wrote the book that I did several years ago. I did not know that this was going to be a book that was so needed at the time. I released it in 2022 and I thought, this would have been a great thing to have in 2016. Maybe I just missed the boat on that Trump presidency. And then I had no idea this would be coming back in 2025. So the book would be even more needed. Intended audience for this book is moms of young children or moms of any kind. But I have said that it's for mothers and others who want to learn how to use their voice to influence policies in the most impactful ways and the most efficiently. So I have some readers who have told me that they don't have any kids, but they're very busy and they like the fact that I've put all the instructions in there because I figured moms were busy, so other busy people like it too. I spent a lot of time convincing moms making the case that we do all have this potential to be powerful advocates because we're already using some of these very important characteristics to raise our children. And this goes for teachers, caregivers, dads, grandparents, things like patience and just a dedication to teaching common decency to young ones and empathy. All of these things feed into our potential to be excellent advocates. I understand that not everybody wants to read a book that has tons of stories about moms and kids and babies. Honestly, I think the pictures are pretty cute. But I understand that. So that's why I have a release of a different book, Advocacy Made Easy, that's targeted toward general audiences. And it's more of a handbook that lets you know, like, what are the actual step-by-step processes for taking these advocacy actions, like calling Congress, writing letters to the editor, having that lobby meeting. It's going to be like a slim 60-page book that gives you just what you need. So hopefully, as you brought up the theme of potential, that'll help people unlock their potential and remove that barrier of just not knowing what to do.
So, a big part of the audience for this podcast are librarians.
Yeah.
So, for me, the connection, and for what I think is going to be for many of our listeners, the connection is the challenges that libraries are facing. Over the past several years, they've been at the front of book bans, trying to defend against book banning. The challenges that libraries face today are amplified by Trump administration's intent to cancel federal grants for libraries and to defund and dismantle the Institute for Library and Museum Services, which is the only office that provides federal funding and support for libraries. What practical advocacy suggestions would you like to offer to librarians and those who support libraries in this political climate?
Okay, number one, thank you, librarians, all of you. Sometimes I would watch those videos or something of librarians talking about trying to keep providing these services. And my heart just goes out to it because all of us are facing challenges that we weren't trained for. This isn't what we signed up for. Everybody is doing the job that they love to do. And now we're having to fight for either the jobs that we want or fight for the people that we wanted to serve. Actually, both of those things. But the advice that I would give is kind of the advice that I give to people of any vocation, which is to organize. We are always stronger when we do this together. So when you look at my book and look at the chapter about how to call Congress or something like that, yes, it's powerful to be able to call in and make your opinion known. But let's go back to the beginning of our conversation, where I was finding out that I could do it. And then I found out that I could be so much more powerful with my community. Back then, we were talking about a literal community of neighbors that lived side by side together. But your community is the other librarians. I'm going to ask you, just because I'm not in that community myself, is there an advocacy organization for librarians at this point?
So, the American Library Association is a policy and advocacy office in Washington, D.C., and does a lot of advocacy work on behalf of the Guild. There are also several organizations, state organizations, and even individual libraries or library consortiums that do organized work, lobbying, developing relationships with their representatives to advocate for funding for libraries.
Yeah, so that's one thing right there. By you doing this podcast and you sharing that information, maybe there are some people out there that haven't connected with those organizations yet. And I would say you need to. You need to. You don't try to go it alone. Like, if I'm working on gun violence or an issue like that, I can't possibly know all the bills that are moving and what's going on and the organizations that you named and talked about. That's what they do. That's what they're good at. Offering yourself up as a voice to amplify that message is really, really important. There's just a couple of other notions pop to mind to talk about, and one is librarians are great at organizing information. And I mean, I don't think that's a secret. So, whatever your strengths are, maybe it's organizing those thoughts and information to have a campaign among librarians to write letters to the editor, because there's probably a lot of people that are voters that don't know the breadth of what you do. I'm pretty sure that I know on the surface what librarians do, but I'm pretty sure that there's so much more that I depend on that I don't think of. So it gets down to storytelling. If you are writing letters to the editor, that gets in the newspaper, and it does two things. Number one, if you name your members of Congress, then that's even more powerful than a handwritten letter to Congress, because the feeds and the artificial intelligence engines that they're using, they're looking for their names all the time in the news for praise and for threats and things like that. But just naming them kind of floats your letter to the top of the pile, which has more significance than a handwritten letter, which is also still important. And once you have like an op-ed or a letter to the editor, sharing it with your colleagues in your state, then they can all print that out, write their opinions about it, and send it to the members of Congress. What I try to help people understand is like all of these advocacy actions can build on each other. So one person gets a letter to the editor, and it can spawn 20 people printing it out, and that's 20 handwritten letters. And if they send it out on social media, everybody tagging the members of Congress, then it can go farther and farther that way. The last thing is not concrete, but it just comes down to creativity and looking at the resources that you have for yourselves. I don't have necessarily a story about librarians to tell, but that was kind of what happened to me when I was a mom, that I was looking around going, I used to be a mechanical engineer, but now I'm just a stay-at-home mom. What am I going to do? Yeah, but you know what I had access to was a lot of kids and a school, and I had a church, and I had friends, and I had a lot more resources than I thought when I began. And using my role as a mother and getting creative with it allowed us to do things. We had hundreds and hundreds of Girl Scouts write in letters about maternal child health. We made paper dolls, and we'd bring in these chains with hundreds of paper dolls. I mean, it was quite a visual. And we sent Valentines with lots of glitter and glue. And I was just using the resources that are around me and being creative in that way. We brought in a speaker from Uganda to speak to our kids. They let me bring in the speaker to all these classes and have like a huge assembly. And I was like, wow, this is my community, and we're a lot of voices. So I don't know what that looks like necessarily for librarians, but the more creative and interesting things are, like, we can use that power of social media. National parks are doing a great job of this right now. Not that everybody needs to go out and learn how to use TikTok, but they're being really effective with it. More so than I thought a bunch of park rangers would be.
I love that sentiment of finding a use for what you've got. Just being aware of the resources that you have and making use of them. So many times I've encountered librarians and others who have a scarcity mindset. It happens when you're in an institution or an organizational context where there's not a lot of money, there's not a lot of funding, or you're short-staffed. People are having to work 1.5 or even 2 jobs and being paid one salary. Being in contexts like that really does encourage this kind of scarcity mindset of, I don't have anything. If I had X, then I would be able to do fill in the blank. While there is some validity to that, I think that mindset, that train of thought, can prevent us from seeing the resources that we do have
Yeah.
and making use of those resources to their fullest in the most efficient way possible. So I really love that example that you give of sending your letters to Congress from hundreds of Girl Scouts as Valentines with glitter, because that's what you've got available to you. There is a power in that that could not have been realized perhaps if you had sent 100 letters from 100 professionals and they were all typeset informal business
Yeah.
type with all of the cases and the argument outlined precisely.
It
Yeah.
is possible that we essentially sent glitter bombs to Congress, and maybe that glitter was all over somebody's desk for months, because you know how that is when you have glitter in your house. It never goes away. But I think it was more welcomed than, like, anthrax or something like that. It's just glitter to gain attention in a positive way. That's a trick. And it's not like anybody can tell you exactly what to do, because these moments usually come up in conversation. So I'm not sure I could have had that idea alone
Mm-hmm.
for any of those things. But by organizing and, just going back, community, 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 that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that librarians have, the ones that I've come across, they usually have libraries with lots of really accessible, great meeting spaces that are highly tech enabled. And I have done many letter to the editor trainings and advocacy trainings and stuff like that. So doing that for yourselves as well as the community may be a very valuable thing to do. Invite me to do it,
Mm-hmm.
We can even do it over Zoom, but those meeting rooms are awesome. And I'm not the only person. I have no corner on the market of advocacy training. I learned all of my skills from that long list of organizations that you read off at the beginning. And there are some results definitely comes to the top of the list that teach advocacy skills. Their primary mission is ending poverty, but secondary and entwined in that is empowering citizens to use their political power
Mm-hmm.
on whatever issue you want to. So the really good advocacy organizations, I feel, teach you the skills and give you that empowerment so you can take it and use it for whatever issue is keeping you up at night.
So, something in your writing that's really resonated with me, and I think this is in some of your more recent blog posts, is how you explore the range of emotions that we
Mm.
bring with us into advocacy work. And it's a true range. It can go from anger to grief to sadness to even joy. What practices or habits have you cultivated that help you honor these emotions and channel them into action?
I didn't used to be such a touchy-feely person when I was like a mechanical engineer, and that wasn't something that was in the engineering training or something like that. I do think that being a mom helped bring out those things in myself, and now it's just, what do you say when you talk to toddlers that are having a meltdown? It's like, wow, we're having some big feelings, aren't we? Have you heard that one? I feel like I'm looking at the country going, wow, we're having some really big feelings, aren't we? I feel like sometimes people are coming to me and saying, like, I am too angry. I'm too angry to even do anything about this. Or when you're sad and overcome with grief, that is a very difficult swamp to walk out of, to be able to do anything. So that's why I decided to do that series. And I don't think I'm done with it right now. I have grief and anger and joy that I've written about. I think despair could probably be one of them, or
Mm-hmm.
just frustration. Focusing on your question again, I'm just trying to address things that people are feeling out there, and I'm trying to give a nudge to remove the barriers. If people are feeling that a particular emotion or set of feelings that they have is shutting them down into inaction, that's the worst thing, because that's what, Project 2025 was about. What we're seeing is like a lot of attacks on a lot of beloved, important programs all happening at once. And that can make you feel really overwhelmed and shut down and just stop working. And we don't want that. I got caught up with the anger one at first. That was the first one that I wrote. And I saw a lot of colleagues in my same space who were just tipping over to the edge. And I was thinking about putting out the second book, and I'm like, I don't know how I want to be because I feel so angry, but that's not my brand. Which it seems so crass to put it that way because I'm not all about the brand. I'm trying to have a brand so I can get it out to more people, but I want to stay consistent with what I've always been talking about: compassion, kindness, empathy. How do I reconcile this anger along with that? So I ended up reading and getting myself aligned with some of the teachings of people like spiritual leader Richard Rohr and Gandhi and stuff like that. And they're like, yes, be angry, but learn to use your anger so that your anger isn't using you. That kind of sounds trite, but I think it's really profound. Don't let your opposition use your anger against you. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yes, very
So it's
important.
like so that writing is more about how do we use anger? Can we turn the concept to using anger as fuel more as something that shuts us down? I talk about in that blog too that I have these two different t-shirts. And it's like, why do I have these two different t-shirts? That one is from Wrinkle in Time, where it says, "Stay angry, Meg, you will need all your anger now." And the other t-shirt that I like says, "Peace be with you." I just wear them in different days and recognize that I'm feeling differently on different days, but these are all a part of me. And how can I use that righteous anger in a way that's constructive that will lead to peace? So that's one of them. About the grief or despair or those kinds of negative emotions of sadness, I think that really does come down to the self-care aspect. And I think that we sometimes just bat that around as drink some water, get some sleep. Yeah, that'd be great, but I'm like so wrapped up in my anxiety that I'm not getting sleep. I shared some resources about advocacy, self-care, but for me, a lot of that comes down to, again, the theme of community, that if I can't pull myself out of my sadness, then I need to be with that powerful group that, on the whole, is working towards something really positive. I'm just saying it may not be everybody, so that as a movement, we can help each other go forward. I think you mentioned to me that you want to talk about burnout a little too.
Yeah,
Avoid
that's the
burnout.
next question.
Yeah, I think it's all related in here. So
Hmm.
we need to protect ourselves. Like I also talk about protecting ourselves from the internet, like being really intentional when we're going to consume our news and things like that. I think this is actually kind of part of the same question. That's one of my strategies for avoiding burnout, is like having those times where you're going to disconnect. I'm very lucky. Outside that window is a park.
Mm.
So if I just leave my phone away, I'm in nature in seconds if I want to be. But it's also giving ourselves permission to do something that is going to intentionally spark joy and delight, which seems so trite sometimes, but there are things that will always be joyful to me. I can't answer this for other people, but I can give you examples for myself. I love dogs. I am not a dog owner, and this is not a time in my life that I can have one. Guaranteed 100% will always insert a little joy and some breaks for me is to go down to the animal shelter and go get a dog that needs a walk. And they are so happy to see me, and I'm so happy to see them. And it's so pure. And
Mm.
I love my children. You love your children. When they're teenagers, they don't always love you, but I'm telling you, those dogs love you 100% of the time. So that's like a guaranteed way I can bring delight for myself. I
Mhm.
also have a 1980s video game downstairs that I just really enjoy It's nostalgia, and it allows me to kind of shut everything off, and I get into sort of a Zen moment of flow when
Mm.
I'm playing certain games. I'm 11 years old and on top of my Ms. Pac-Man game again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, and these things benefit nobody at all. There's a favorite LGBTQ activist that I know named Ben Green, and he writes about it in a book that he wrote. It's like, do things that are of absolutely no benefit to anyone but yourself and maybe some friends. And I think his thing is like playing Dungeons and Dragons and unplugging. These are just examples of small things to remember. What I also wrote about in my blog about joy, I think is really important in the view of when you're trying to organize and bring in activists around you, is when everybody's feeling really despondent.
Hmm.
If we're always very serious and bringing people into the conversation with how dire everything is, people will think, I don't necessarily want to do that. I had that at home. Like, what's the point
Mm-hmm.
of that? I think it was Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, lead, but do it in a way so that others will follow. When I am creating events, I'm trying to not only tell people what the problem is, but also lift them up in some ways. And that might just be in the way that I'm welcoming them. It might be in the place, the venue. Maybe it's in a park, like we mentioned, or nature, or again with the creativity. If you have to meet in a Dave and Buster's, if you like that video game thing, do that. But finding ways to make it appealing for us to lift each other up instead of like all dragging each other down. I think it's important to get in touch with our joy and inner delight in some way so that we can be that for each other.
Mm-hmm. Listening to you talk more about this, it's reminding me of a book that I have started reading. This is the second time I've started reading it, but it's by Margaret Wheatley called Who Do We Choose to Be? And in that book, she introduces the idea of creating or building islands of sanity. When we're in the midst of so
I
much
like that.
chaos, so much change, where those feelings of dire consequences and everything's falling apart are just so overwhelming. Being able to create an island of sanity where there is something positive happening, or you are being fed in some way, where you find your community and you can support each other. And yes, all of the chaos, all of the things that make us angry, all of the sadness and the grief is still there on the outside surrounding the island. But you can choose, right? You can choose when you want to engage that, when it's most empowering to tap into that anger, to tap into the frustration, to tap into
Yeah.
the chaos, and when you need to be fed by your island of sanity.
I mean, maybe there's something in there about, controlling what you can, or
Mm.
controlling when you engage, controlling when you don't. There's another activity that I do that it's sort of interesting in that it's very much under my control and not. That I'm a volunteer for Make-A-Wish. I am a Make-A-Wish wish granter, which means that I am in contact with usually about two families at a time. I am a volunteer that is in direct contact with the family to determine what the wish is, but it takes a long time to grant these wishes.
Mm.
I am in charge of sending them wish boosts every month. It's my job to get to know what the kid likes or doesn't like and just to make them happy. Now, the lack of control is I don't know what is going to happen to this child. That is up
Mm.
to the medical team, our creator. These are very much out of my control, but what I can do is get to know them and just send little things that are going to make them happy. And that also makes me happy.
Mm-hmm.
So there's something about like bringing it into a manageable area because advocacy is We can't predict what's going to happen. I can't tell you what's going to happen in this fight over Medicaid. I can't tell you what's going to happen to library funding and stuff like that. It's something that we can't control, but we can influence. You understand what I mean? It's like if I totally disengage, then I'm powerless and I don't have a say in it. If I do engage, I can influence what's happening, but at some point, I think for my own sanity, I also have to let go of the outcome of any particular battle. The USAID issue earlier this year, if you heard about that, USAID is where most of our foreign aid humanitarian funding flows through. Some goes through the State Department, but USAID was by far where most of it went. And President Trump and Elon Musk with Doge came through and over the course of days just dismantled it, and thousands of workers were out of jobs, and life-saving health clinics were just locked and people couldn't get to them. That was devastating. That was probably when I wrote my grief one blog. So I continue to fight that fight, and like I might be working on something for nutrition. I might win that one, but I might lose a battle over tuberculosis funding. We're just trying to like get these scraps back as we go. In order for me to exist as a whole person, I have to tap into some sort of Zen place where I can keep fighting the fight, but not have my whole being attached to one specific bill in legislation, and see this is a continuum. This is a time we're living through. There have been bad times in the United States. You and I aren't used to them. We're too young. We didn't have some of the wars and challenges, and we didn't live through Vietnam. We weren't here for it. So we are unpracticed. There's a phrase for malaria. If you haven't had malaria in an area, they call it a malaria naive area. I think we are naive in this area, but we need to wise up real fast, but also give myself permission to not be responsible, like not take it on as a personal failing if one particular piece of legislation doesn't go through.
That is so wise. So
Yeah,
very wise.
See if I can do it. I try. Since you have video, this is visible. I can see on the screen. There's something else that I do, and this probably is not self-care. This is anger management, but not self-care. I was so angry the other day. I am like retired from Taekwondo, but I still have all the equipment in my basement. And I was so angry that I let loose with over 1,000 punches into a Wave Master, which is like a heavy bag. And I just punched all the skin off my knuckles.
Wow.
So that was not health care for my skin, but it like helped me manage my anger at the time. So there's physical evidence that I'm a peaceful person, but I also get angry. So what a conversation. We should just all watch Inside Out too after this. Talk about all our emotions.
Well, Cynthia, this has been a great conversation. You've already shared a lot about what's coming up in your next book, Advocacy Made Easy, the handbook for turning civic frustration into powerful action. Is there anything else that you want to share with us that we can look forward to in this book?
Yeah, just to describe it again, this is something that I saw that was needed for general audiences, that I'm usually talking to moms and parents, caregivers. But in 2025, it just seems like everybody could use the refresher if you have done it before, or just to know these skills. It's a handbook. It's going to be around 60 pages or something like that. My goal is that it's inexpensive, so that's not a barrier for anybody. It will also be available as an e-reader type thing. I am going to tell you that it would be impossible to put every kind of advocacy action available to us inside a 60-page book. That's just not possible. So the ones that I have presented are the ones that I think are most suited for the exchange of ideas and things like that, which again, I think it is very important to have protests in the streets and to do that kind of thing. The kind of advocacy that I'm talking about is that bridge building kind of thing, and where the exchange of ideas can come from writing for media or writing a handwritten letter or sitting down in a meeting and things like that. So if you want to learn how to organize a protest, that's going to be a different book.
Hmm.
If you want to learn how to work within the system that we have and to try to actually contact the people who are currently in power, this is that book. What I say in the beginning of it is that I know things are hard and I know that we feel powerless sometimes. Going back to what I said before, it's like you can't predict what's going to happen. Like, I can't say that if you take all the actions in this book, that you will win. Hopefully, it gets it farther down the goal and it can teach you how to organize and how to teach others these skills, because we need a lot more people. Like we said, there's a lot more attacks coming from a lot more directions. So if we don't want to burn out totally, we need to bring in more people. So this is a tool to help that. I can't tell you if you do all of this that you'll win on your particular issue, but I will tell you that if you do some of the things in this book, you will feel better,
Hmm.
less powerless, and you'll feel like you did something in the time that we have here, because there are people that are kind of sitting out resisting what's going on. But this is the only time that we have to make any change. And isn't it wonderful that we're here on the earth at the same time,
Hmm.
that we work together on it? So that is the crux of it. It's concrete, step-by-step instructions to do these things, to better share ideas, and to make you feel more powerful and less frustrated. That's what it's about. It should be out this summer, and I wish I could share my cover art and stuff like that, but that's still being worked on. But I'm so glad we got the chance to talk about it now.
Sure. And, I'll be sure to put links to your website, to your current book, your blog, all in the show notes. And folks can watch those and learn about your new book when it's released, and maybe even follow you on social media and see the cover when you're able to post it there.
Absolutely. That's the best way. If you're interested in knowing when it comes out, the best thing to do is to go to my website, www.changyit.com, which will be in the show notes. And there is a newsletter sign up that you can get my monthly newsletter. You'll be among the first to know. And each newsletter always has an easy advocacy action that you can take on a variety of issues. So, yeah, thanks for sharing all that good stuff. I hope to see some of your listeners on social media.
Well, thank you so much for your time today and for such a wonderful conversation. I really do appreciate the work that you do, and I appreciate you sharing your wisdom and your encouragement with me and with my listeners.
It's great to be here. Thank you, Myka.
I hope you've enjoyed listening in on my conversation with Cynthia Changyit Levin. I hope you feel empowered and inspired to take part in advocacy work on behalf of your community. Links to Cynthia's website, book, and newsletter are in the show notes, and I invite you to watch for her new book coming out later this summer. If you would like to stay connected with me and Fosgail, please sign up for our monthly newsletter, Field Notes, if you have not already. It includes prompts for reflection, the latest from our blog and podcast, upcoming opportunities, and behind-the-scenes news and miscellanea from the Fosgail team. You might also consider joining the Fosgail community. It's a membership platform that provides a space for discussion, encouragement, inspiration, and support. The always open, forever free tier is open to anyone who is looking for a safe and supportive space to explore the challenges of leadership in uncertain times and cultivating professional well-being. This could be a great place to brainstorm with like-minded professionals about advocacy efforts in our communities, including our libraries, museums, and other organizations struggling in this current political climate. Links to join the community and sign up for the newsletter are also in the show notes. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Fosgail Mindset. Please do subscribe using your favorite podcast provider so that you can receive new episodes as soon as we drop them. Until next time, I hope you find open possibilities.